lockdown, and the increasing noise around AI. All these things are much more prevalent in the communications that we have with people. Today, we're looking at sales, which is obviously an area which historically relied heavily on building strong, sustainable relationships between the seller and the buyer. And despite the challenges posed by these sophisticated approaches that I've meant, and particularly in the approach to procurement, the personal face-to-face approach to sales has held on very strongly. So we'll learn hopefully today how the sales community has reacted to the changes imposed on them, and more particularly how they see the future. So the format today is we have 4 speakers, and I'll introduce them to you, give you a bit of information about them, where they're from, and what their interest is. And they'll make a short pitch on how they see the landscape. We'll listen to all 4 of them, one after the other, and then we'll open the floor to questions. If you have any questions as we go through, please could you use the chat column in Zoom. I know there's a Q&A opportunity in Zoom, but we're going to use the chat column so we can all see what's going on. And if you have any comments, observations, insights as we go through, please do use the chat column. It makes it a little bit more interactive. The Zoom webinar is a great tool, but the audience is on mute and off camera. So the chat column is really an opportunity for you to engage. You are off camera and you are muted, but if you have a question to pose at the end, we can put you on spotlight so we can see you and hear you, sort of seeing the whites of your eyes, as it were. So my name's Bruce Rowling, and with Mark Erskine, who you'll hear from in a moment, we're the sole LIFO partners for the UK. That's Life Orientations behavior profiling tool, and the co-founders of Applied Strengths, which is the vehicle for LIFO sales, training and consultancy here in the UK. Beacon is the parent of Life Orientations. We'd like to thank them because they've sponsored this series of events and have showed a great interest in what we're doing, and they support us a lot. That's a bit of a segue into telling you that Mark is speaking to us from Kyoto, where he's attending the Life Summit, hence the backdrop to his face there on the screen. I'm getting my own back a little bit because it's 3 o'clock in the UK, or past 3 in the UK, but it's just past midnight in Japan, and I'm getting my own back because I attended a session this morning at 4:30 UK time, so we're both having fairly long days. So that's the plan for today, and I think without further ado, we'll get into the meat of it. Mark is going to speak to us first, but I would just like to tell you a little bit about Mark. I said earlier on that he's my co-founder and co-partner in Applied Strengths. And Mark is a highly experienced sales performance specialist. And as I said, he's contributing from Kyoto today. He's got 30 years of experience in business-to-business sales, and he's a true expert in his field. He's also a master trainer and coach of the Life Orientation system, and uses that behavioral profiling a lot in the work that he does around sales, particularly focusing on leveraging innate strengths to build better relationships and drive revenue growth. He has an extensive background, including a decade as a Miller Heiman independent sales consultant, where he facilitated and delivered their methodology to organizations worldwide. And he's run his own consultancy, Seller Performance, for the last 13 years. Interesting to know if he's had any particular conversations while he's out in Kyoto, but Mark is our first speaker. So over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I've had a few conversations, mostly with taxi drivers, trying to explain where I'd like them to take me. But apart from that, what I'd like to do first off is, Mike, if you can share the graphic we produced, because I really want to set the scene with some research into this topic and really what people are saying about it. So as you'll be able to see here on the screen now, we've got 5 pieces of research that I've just picked out, which demonstrate really what's happening. So first, from an organization called Bain & Company, 92% of B2B buyers prefer virtual sales interactions. From Gartner, predicts that 80% of interactions between buyers and sellers will be occurring via digital channels by 2025. 80%. Showpad, 92% of millennials and Gen Z's buyers prefer virtual selling, with 69% of them saying there's no need for the traditional face-to-face meeting at all. McKinsey saying 76% of sales leaders actually say that remote sales interactions are equally or more effective than in traditional in-person engagements when prospecting for new customers. And lastly, G2, 64% of sales team who made the jump to virtual selling met or exceeded their target goals, compared to 50% of the teams that didn't really engage in it. So the point behind these stats for me is, we can talk all we like about the selling process. It's the buying process that matters. What do the buyers want to do? How do they want to engage? Yeah, that's the critical factor. You can take that slide down now, Mike, if you like. So for me, I've always strongly believed, and I know it to be the case, people buy people. It's a truism, not a cliche. It's true. Neuroscience tells us that when we engage with people, if we engage properly, we create affinity bias, which means that they feel more comfortable with us. And if they feel more comfortable, they share and everything else that goes with that. And in a world today where I'm sure most of you agree, I mean, differentiation is scarcer than ever. You know, if you look back 10, 15 years, you might say, who's the most differentiated company on the planet? It's Apple. They certainly aren't now. You know, there's little to choose between all of the products and services out there. The point being that the one true differentiator that every organization who sells anything has is their people and how they sell. And that makes the difference in a buying process and a selling process. So that's really important to be able to understand. But the fact is, and again, we've got some research which I might mention a little bit later during the Q&A, that says actually we're not really good at it. Buyers don't think we're good at it at all. You know, buyers don't believe that sellers are using virtual selling effectively or well. And for me, it's become a bit like, you know, when you ask salespeople why they lose a deal, and 90% of salespeople will tell you it's on price, and 90% of buyers will say it's anything but that. Well, for me, you know, the lack of relationship selling has been the excuse now for people losing business or not winning business. And it's an excuse for poor salesmanship and poor use of technology. And we just need to get on the bus, quite frankly. That's what it's about. Part of the theme and part of the things that I'm talking about is when you get on screen, the reason we're not building relationships is we don't get those behavioral cues from people when you're in the room with them. That's really clear. So we need to look for other ways of doing that. For me, LIFO, orientations, behavioral profiling tools, whatever tool that you might be using, is a key ingredient in that. If you can think about the behavioral preferences of your customers, you can adapt rather than let the brain in face-to-face meetings does it fairly automatically. We adjust to the people that we're with. But some of the techniques which we can now use to actually engage with people by understanding their profile before we meet them, there are tools on LinkedIn and processes and apps that can all help you do that so that you can adjust more consciously and get better at what we do. Loads of techniques for what we should be doing in meetings to make them more effective. We're just not good at it. And that has to change. We need to really get on board and get on with it. So there's a phrase from my Miller Hyman years that we used to say time and time again. It was a slide in the deck which says whatever got you to where you are today is not enough to keep you there. You have to move on, and we need to move on. Pandora's box has been opened. Get on with it, salespeople. Let's start using these tools and making use effectively. Back to you, Bruce.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Obviously, you and I talk a lot, and we have talked a little bit about these figures. I find the stats very interesting and very compelling. It seems to me that these high numbers are driven by the buyers. So those stats come out of a buying process, and later on, perhaps when we get into the Q&A, I'd be interested personally to know what's behind that motivation, what drives that, apart from convenience. I know there's convenience and accessibility, but I wonder if there's anything more in a behavioral sense behind that buyer preference for remote. So great, thank you very much. That's our first contribution from Mark in Kyoto. I'd like now to introduce Kevin Haler, who is the visionary behind his company Sales Made Easy Limited. Kevin's journey is as unique as it gets: a football-loving, wine-drinking entrepreneur. Pause, let's take that in. Who spent the last 3.5 years living his dream in Southwest France. Through Sales Made Easy, Kevin is on a mission to redefine sales, transforming it from a dirty word into a profession that commands respect. In 2023, Kevin and his team achieved remarkable results, helping clients increase their sales by an average of 24% through his groundbreaking virtual sales manager formula. By acting as a dedicated sales manager for businesses, they've implemented 12 key elements essential for building successful sales teams, alleviating pressure and frustration for business owners. So it says here, we are eagerly anticipating Kevin's insights. So now is your moment, Kevin.
Bruce, thank you.
Put the glass of red wine down.
It's too late. I've just finished the bottle. But Bruce, thank you for the introduction. That was I'll pay you the money later on. That was terrific. Good afternoon. Lovely to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Does the surge in virtual sales threaten relationship selling? In a word, no. That could be my pitch done, quite frankly. I actually think it's the opposite. I think it helps relationship selling. I really, really do. I'm an advocate of virtual sales, and just give a little bit more background on me. I did move to France 3.5 years ago, and I founded Sales Made Easy in the first lockdown. So I moved to France with a kind of an embryo of an idea, and have built the company from here virtually. I've now got 2 of us that work in France, 2 in the UK, 1 recently joined us in South Africa, and 1 in the Philippines. All my sales have been done virtually. And over the time, we've probably recruited in the region of just over 50 new clients. Just to give you a sense of the size of the clients, and it's relevant because people say you can't always win big ticket deals virtually. You've got to do this face to face. I completely disagree. We've won 50 plus clients. Average value is £2,000 a month per client. Average lifespan is 6 months for that client. Our biggest deal was worth 240,000 over 8 months. And again, won virtually. 90% of my client coaching is done virtually, and 99% of the team and project one is done virtually. So I think I'm making a point here. I'm a bit of an advocate in virtual sales and virtual working. But in my experience and my view is, I think since the pandemic, there's been a huge digital transformation, a huge change in sales and in communication per se. Let's face it, my 87-year-old dad and my 82-year-old mum and my partner's 90-year-old mum can use WhatsApp video to communicate with us, and they do, then everybody can. And it's interesting, I think the stats that were shown just now back it up. The buyers want this. They don't necessarily want to sit with us face to face. The technology has advanced massively with the video channels, with Zoom, Teams, Google, etc. The platforms, the virtual sales aids, the collaboration tools, presentation software has made life a lot easier. But it does come back to the people's behavior, to me, the buyer's behavior, which is critical to this. And I think we in sales, as in trainers and coaches and people in sales people need to adapt massively here. Because I think the buyer's journey starts online before they meet us. By the way, I do agree with you, Mark, it's still about relationship sales in a lot of places. But there's a lot more done up front digitally. Prospects want to get access to information. They want to look at video content. They want to do their research. They want to learn themselves. Let them browse. Be open, be transparent about your pricing. They're going to find out anyway, so don't point in hiding it. Let them decide if they want a conversation with you. And if they do, then that's when we go into sales mode, when they come in, or rather we make it easy for them to buy from us. Marcus Sheridan, the author of the book, one of my favorite books, They Ask You Answer, said that 70% of the decision-making is done before anybody engages with a salesperson. So there's 2 aspects of virtual selling. One is the digital piece up front, the content up front, and then it's the engagement with us in sales. And that's where the relationship part does kick in. What's changed? Nothing. I'm running out of time here. Crikey, I've clearly overshot massively. So in summary, I'm basically going to say very little has changed on relationship selling. I think use the tools, engage with people, use the digital content to keep in touch with people. It'll streamline the process, shorter, sharper, much more effective for both buyer and seller.
Great. Thank you. My appearance on the screen is a cue for the speaker that time is running out, but fascinating stuff, Kevin. Thank you very much. Something that you said that resonated with me about the buyer's journey starting online before they've had any contact. As long ago as I think probably 22, 23 years ago, I did some work with Philips in the Netherlands. And at that time, they were advertising products online, and you could choose it. You could personalize some of these items for yourself, that you could have personalized messages on them. You could choose the color, and all that was done online before you ever started talking about price or speaking to anybody about its functionality or anything like that. So it goes back quite a long way, and I suppose with the advance of technology now, that journey's become quicker, easier, and more accessible. So that was an interesting, one of many interesting comments you made. So thank you very much. We've had a note in the chat column. Please, can you put the name of the book and author Kevin referenced in the chat? We will do that.
I'll do that now.
Good. Okay. So thank you very much. So moving swiftly on to our third speaker, Chris Batty. Chris is this is his second appearance on our series. He made some fantastic contributions to our last discussion around leadership. But he's wearing a different hat today. So we're very pleased to welcome him back. He's an award-winning learning and development professional with a strong focus on driving sales excellence. He's renowned for his expertise in enhancing business performance through high-impact behavior change programs tailored specifically for sales teams. He's got over 18 years of experience and has collaborated closely with senior stakeholders to address sales challenges head-on, fostering a culture of continuous improvement. Throughout his career, Chris has honed his expertise in sales enablement, working with directors, managers, and executives to nurture their capabilities and drive revenue growth. His deep understanding of the sales environment and behavior change promises to offer invaluable perspectives for us. So, Chris, your invaluable perspectives are heading our way.
Bruce, thank you, and thank you to everyone who's been able to join us. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I guess we start off with the concept of what is relationship-based selling, and I think that is a great place for us to start. What actually does it mean? I think if it means that you simply win work on the strength of the relationship based on the strength of your sort of personality and character, then I think virtual selling is going to kill your version of selling. Quite frankly, I really do. If, however, relationship-based selling is around the concept of building trust and differentiating and creating value in a conversation or discussion, then I don't think it's dead at all. In fact, I would agree with Kevin and with Mark that it plays its part superbly well. Really, when we think about it, this isn't the first time that sales has been impacted by concepts around technology. 25 years ago, Google played a big part in helping us reshape the way in which we need to think. And Kevin quoted a stat there. I'd heard a slightly different one, but it doesn't really matter. A lot of the buyer's journey has taken place before anyone ever speaks to a salesperson. So therefore, that meant that selling had to change. There was no longer the classic knocking on the door, you're the local person, and all of a sudden, the strength of that relationship is what will happen. It was far more, the information and power had transitioned over to the buyer. And that was really the first time that selling had really hit this issue around technology. I don't think that virtual selling is going to have the same level of impact on sales at all. In fact, I think it's going to contribute superbly well. And I think it's something that we do need to embrace and we do need to go along with. And that stat actually, Mark, that you showed earlier, the 92% of millennials and Gen Zers, they are wanting this form of virtual sales. That's here to stay. And the buyer's journey is really important. And so therefore, I would argue It's hugely important that we embrace it. It's hugely important that we get on board and we actually adapt ourselves to do a much better job in this particular environment. I think it isn't the be all and the end all, though. I do think that there will be elements of face-to-face conversations in the sales process that will add tremendous value as well. And so I think actually they're complementary. It's not an either or situation. But clearly, you know, Mark's sat in Japan and I'm sat in the UK. And it's not going to be easy for either one of us to jump on a plane and have a face-to-face. Virtual has opened up that opportunity brilliantly. And I think we do need to embrace it. I think it requires a mindset shift. And I actually think it requires behavior change in the salesperson, Bruce. And from that perspective, I'll pause there, my friend.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I think those last couple of points you made were really interesting. We spent a lot of time at Applied Strengths talking about hybrid working, not specifically around sales, but encouraging both employees and the organizations that they work for to embrace the idea of hybrid. So not kicking out one or kicking out the other, but making them work together. And I think that idea of blending the opportunities for face-to-face with the advantages of the remote contact is probably the way forward. So thank you very much for that. There's plenty to talk about when we get to the Q&A. Last but by no means least of our four speakers, I'd like to introduce you to Chris James, who is the founder of Train the Sales Trainer, who brings his expertise in sales training in particular. His passion lies in helping individuals and teams achieve success in their sales careers, and he's dedicated to making a significant impact through effective training and coaching. As the founder of Train the Sales Trainer, Chris has had the privilege of working with sales teams across diverse industries, from startups to large corporations. His approach is both thoughtful and creative, driven by a genuine enthusiasm for empowering sales professionals to excel in their roles. His expertise promises to offer some valuable perspectives on the complex sales world we find ourselves in, and especially perhaps on the subject of training and coaching. So, Chris, welcome. You're on mute.
Hi guys, thank you for having me, and ladies out there. For me, you know, we look at it, the surge of virtual sales accelerated by technology advancements and global events like the COVID-19 pandemic has just completely changed the landscape of sales across various industries. Although, you know, I believe that before all this, we rarely went door to door or to visit customers anymore. You know, it's just too big a global forum out there. Virtual sales have become increasingly popular due to convenience, obviously, cost effectiveness, and the ability to reach a wider audience. The model has been further accelerated by the global shift towards remote work and digital transformation across industries. Personally, I believe the surge of virtual selling enhances relationship selling, because on a global stage, we can't do everything and we can't be everywhere all at once. I do not believe today that a sales function could succeed outside of the virtual world. And when we look at what the virtual world is, digital communication skills, you know, we rely on, like we're doing today, this is digital, video conferencing, Zoom, media platforms, instant messaging apps. We interact with people in an easier, more comfortable way. One of the things I want to talk about in a minute is online presentations and demos. It's so easy to go into someone's room now to do a sales presentation. Product demonstrations are conducted easily online using screen sharing, virtual meeting platforms, allowing sales professionals to reach customers regardless of their geographical limitations. And of course, virtual sales teams. Sales teams can operate remotely now. But, you know, I look at Amir in Argentina and these different places where they can quite comfortably call in to anywhere in the world. So for me, yeah, it's great, but it's as good as it is poor. Now, many moons ago, I realized that sales reps are moving into presentations. Yeah, they've got great sales knowledge. They know their product, but they haven't got a Scooby-Doo about how adults learn, how to design presentations, and how to be an effective teacher of their solution. They had little understanding of the mind and how it interprets information. You see, AEs are now educators, but they don't understand how to teach, or how the mind works, or how prospects could even remember what they've taught. I watch many presentations where there's pulsing cursors, there's too many ants or words on the screen, images, talking over slides, non-personalization. There's no understanding of the rule set of the mind. Only one piece of information can get in and be remembered. And we forget that. So in this virtual world, we haven't educated ourselves how to be virtual sellers. So if I say, yeah, it's great to do a virtual presentation, and I watch this AE and they've got animations going on, they're talking over the animations, they've got words on the screen, what is the customer going to remember? And this is the big problem. This is what, one of the impacts. When you're there in person, you tend to see what's happening and you can describe to the person in front of you. When it's virtual, you don't see the other person's view of it. And I think that's very big, that we need to educate our AEs how to be educators. They need to learn how the mind works, what the person on the other side is thinking, and how we can help them have memorable experiences of our solution. And that's me done.
Great, thank you very much, Chris. That's a lovely segue into a couple of questions that I personally would be interested in exploring. I hope perhaps the audience would be as well. But first of all, I'd like to thank the four of you very much indeed for your contributions this afternoon. There's always a fear, actually, without having swapped notes beforehand, that four people will come in one after the other and violently agree with each other for 20 minutes. And we get kind of one view expressed four different ways. But fortunately, you've all approached it from a slightly different angle. So that wasn't planned. It was just serendipitously delivered by you. So thank you very much. I just checking the chat to see if any questions have come in. Not at the moment. So I have a question, and it sort of leads on a little bit from what Chris was saying about training. Obviously, all of you, I think, have had some experience of sales training and training people in sales selling techniques. I just wonder whether the profile of the sort of person who's going to be really good at selling in the future is going to change. Their behavioral profile, their operating style, as well as the skills that they obtain through training. I don't know whether anybody has a view on that, whether we're looking for a different profile now.
I think you almost look at Challenger, teach, tailor, take control. We need people to be able to educate our prospects. And what we tend to do is we teach them all this sales methodology, sales processes, but we don't actually teach them at the heart of relationship building, which is what the customer is feeling when you're presenting to them, what they're seeing, what they notice, and more importantly, what do they remember? Because if you have two different kind of presentations, you've got company A, who really does, it's a really nice, sleek presentation, whether it's personalized and in line with the needs of the customer. And you get another presentation where it's all high floss and great animations and cursors flicking, and the customer's going, oh, it looks savvy, but I can't remember a single thing that you told me there. No. So I think it's really important that we nail down on what we need in virtual sales to be successful.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Anybody else on the panel like to comment on
that?
Yeah,
I'd like to build on something that Chris said earlier, and this piece around, we're not picking up those behavioral cues. When you're in the room with somebody, you sense whether they're engaged or not, because of their body language, because of everything else. We're not seeing that full picture anymore. So some of our language skills, sellers have got to get used to it. They need to ask more attitude questions, bring people in. So David, what do you think of that? And Marcia, have you got an opinion on this, to engage and get people involved? It's really important to be able to do that. Your use of language is really, really important. You've got to be better prepared in terms of questions. You've got to be better planned, better organized. So I think there is a difference. That sometimes salespeople, when they're in the room, historically have been able to wing it. rely on their skills to be able to get away with it without doing their prep and with everything else. On virtual, I think that's really exposed that when you do that, because you just don't get the engagement,
I
and
totally
therefore
agree. So
there's a different aspect to it. There's a different profile that you need.
I'm
Yeah,
not sure I'm going to
Kevin,
agree. I'm
right?
I'm going to go split this into two halves. I think from in my experience, and we coach an awful lot of salespeople at the moment, and particularly how we work. I think the actual sales process doesn't shift, doesn't change. And engaging with somebody, it's all about in the early stages building a relationship with somebody, building the trust, understanding the fact finding, discovery, getting into the detail, the impact of the problems you're going to try and solve, all the usual kind of stuff. I think you can do that equally as well virtually compared to face to face. I think both are much better than the phone, by the way. But I think virtually is equally as easy to do. You can't get all of the non-verbal cues. I get that. But actually, in the discovery phase, I think you can get to real impact and build a very strong relationship with people. Now, what's interesting, that the second part of it, when you're then presenting back who you are and how you can solve some of those problems, yeah, that needs a bit more work. It's less backwards and forwards, especially if you're screen sharing. It feels like more of a pitch to them, which is why the first part is even more important now, to make sure they're on side and you've got the relationship there. So I think the pitching side of it afterwards, you got to be quite careful. And I'll take your point, Chris, as well. Not too razzmatazz. It's trying to help them hear the words while seeing the verbal cue that goes with it to get the message across.
Yeah, I think there's a key point on that. Whilst you want to engage people with powerful visuals and images and those sorts of things, but when you do, you actually just haven't got the eyes to see how people are receiving it. So if you're going to use slides for me, well, use them sparingly, because you want to be talking to people, you want to be engaged with people. And I think that's really important. I mean, and I go back to my favorite salesperson of all time, or sales philosopher of all time, which was Aristotle. He said, if you want to persuade people, it's about pathos, ethos, and logos. You need logical reasoning why you want to buy. You need pathos, which is the empathy, the relationship, the trust, and you need ethos, which in Aristotle's words meant credibility. Yeah, why should I want to listen to you? And people should just go back to basics. All of those things need to be in place.
It
For
does,
all
but
the
I think
methodologies since, I love him.
you've got to
Aristotle.
use the technology carefully. Let's go with screen share, just this very simple one for the moment. I think if you're engaging, you've done all the fact finding discovery, you're probably on a second or third meeting by now. Certainly we would be on what we're selling. When you're pitching to them, going through a slide deck, whatever, you're right, don't put too much detail. The usual kind of rules apply. But if they start to engage and have a conversation, come straight off the screen share. And that's where you get them back on full screen and engage eye to eye as best you can on virtual and have a proper conversation. Once you've done that conversation, the time's right, then you can go back to screen share. I think the danger is not to stay on screen share, to keep that communication going. That's critical to me.
I think, yeah, you're right. One of the things I see is preparation. Presentations give little ownership to the prospect. They are just taught at the customer. The customer has no ownership of anything. In person, you can touch, play with solution. You can see it working quite easily. Whereas in presentations, it's different. So if we prepared better, for example, we got a sandbox version that they could interact with. So if we say, our solution can do A, B, and C, it can save you time, it's as easy as this. Then instead of just showing them, give them the ability to actually click on A, B, C. Look how easy that was. Oh yeah, I get that, because now I've got ownership. I've touched it. I've felt it. But so very few presentations give an ownership where the prospect is actually living in that world. It's all just a screen in front of them. So one of the things I got people to do is send a link to a sandbox that they could talk through it as they're going through it, which gave total ownership.
Good. Chris Batty, sorry, I wasn't sure whether you were leaning forward because you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, Bruce, thank you. I think if I go back to the premise of your question, you kind of positioned it that do those behaviors need to change as they go along with the virtual world. And I actually think that there are surface level tactical behaviors that might need to change, but some of the deeply held skills and character traits of a strong salesperson are unchanging principles, being candid. And I think it's a bit of a misnomer. It could be misleading for us to sit here and say there needs to be some sort of massive behavior change program with a virtual environment. I don't think that's fair. I still think at the forefront of this, emotional intelligence is everything. You know, self-awareness, adaptability, emotional expression, all of these things I think are ever present in a sales environment, whether you're on a telephone, whether you are exchanging an email, whether you are on a virtual call, whether you're shaking someone's hand, they're always going to be there. Those are the unchanging principles. Trust, credibility have got to be there. Mark, you made a quote right at the start. People, in my opinion, people buy people first, then they buy a business, and then they buy a product or service. So we can tactically talk about presentations and screen sharing and how quickly we get on and off that. And I think that's a really important tactic, hugely important. But actually, we've still got to be talking about how people apply really important relationship-based skills in order to establish credibility, in order to establish a really strong, credible, trust-based presentation of themselves. Really, I think that's hugely important, and I don't want us to forget that in the kind of the dialogue that we're talking about virtual, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for that. That's a conversation that I'm sure could run and run, but I'm keen to introduce a question that doesn't come from me. It hasn't actually come from the audience today. It's come via LinkedIn. Well, it might have come, but it's come via LinkedIn. And the question is, if you can only work face to face, are you a good relationship builder?
No.
Okay, thanks.
I agree. I agree with Kevin. No,
I'm going to echo what Chris has just said, because
Janet is actually here, Bruce.
Oh, right. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm going to echo exactly what Chris has just said, because I think he's absolutely right. And I tried to say it in my opening part. Pitching, yeah, fine, you've got to adapt a few things. You're right, it's a tactical change in how you work. The fundamentals don't change at all. Building a relationship with somebody is building a relationship with somebody. Building trust is building trust. That's emotional intelligence to be able to do so. The right questioning, fact-finding, all of the usual things we should be doing are no different on camera compared to face-to-face or over the phone at the end of the day. So therefore, no, is my answer.
Interesting one. I always talk about the donut guy. So when we go face to face with people, we always bring a little treat to whoever we're going to meet. And when I was at a company before, we used to bring donuts, and we call it the scale. So how are we going to get the scale from, hey, I've got a solution in place, I'm quite happy with my solution in place, to actually listening to us and buying our solution? Well, the donuts help. And that cheeky person or the nice person in front of you who talks to you helps, because you form a better relationship. But is it realistic in this day and age? Because if we look at a scale, we need 3 things to tip the scale in our advantage. One of them we won't get virtually. But in a professional makeup, having donuts shouldn't matter. So I agree with you guys. I think that you should be able to be a great relationship builder online and offline. And it's all about the tip of scales. Can we tip the scales virtually? Brilliant. If we can't, then we're not going to be a good relationship builder anyway.
Good, thank you. On that note, I've just seen in chat, Janet had her hand up, and Mike has said, oh, there we go. Janet, welcome.
Oh yeah. Yes, well, I wanted to contribute. Funnily enough, I think Chris almost said everything I was going to say, but just to give you context, Chris James knows me. I'm a sales trainer too. So my view is that although the mechanism might be different, so it's virtual instead of face-to-face, it literally, as Chris said, it's the same evergreen skills, isn't it? It's questioning and listening, it's matching a solution to a need, it's adaptability, it's consistency, it's being able to compute in your head what a benefit is to that particular customer. So I believe all of those are still consistent, but it's just in a different way. And do you know what? We used to sell by fax. Not great. I don't really want to return to that. Things, yeah, the convenience of messaging when it's used properly is much better than email because it is pretty much instant. So I think there's lots of benefits to it. And the only other thing I was going to say was, in terms of the buyer journey, yeah, sure, they have much more control over the process and they will have done their research before they reached out. But actually, if you're smart about it, that can still work to your advantage because you've done all those things. Like, I mean, I get a lot of leads from LinkedIn. I don't know who those people are half the time, but because I've got a presence and because it's credible, people will find you. And we've got to be aware of that. We can't just sit there and rely on marketing to do it for us. We, as salespeople, we're our brand, we're out there and we're visible. So that's what I wanted to add, but Chris said a lot of it, so I've changed a little bit.
Thank you very much. No, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant. There's a few more stats that I thought I'd throw on the table, because this is what there's a few things about buyers are selling about the skills of salespeople virtually, and actually I'm not sure it's changed. I'm not sure it's changed from virtual into reality. We're just not good enough a lot of the time to be able to do these things. Only 26% of buyers believe sellers are skilled at leading a thorough needs discovery. I think that was true whether it's virtual or face-to-face. 34% of buyers report that sellers are skilled at showing them what's possible or how to solve a problem. Only 34%. 26% of buyers only say sellers are competent listeners. Well, what a surprise that is. And incredibly, a mere 16% of buyers say sellers are very effective at making an ROI case when selling virtually. And so the sad truth, only 1 to 3 in 10 sellers do well in the 4 areas that buyers said were the most important. We just need better skills. Doesn't matter whether they're virtually or face to face. If you haven't got those skills, you're not going to survive.
Okay.
No, I completely agree. There's one other point I'm making. I know we're running out of time now. We're running a live webinar next week on momentum in sales, and I think actually, you know, good sales comes from momentum. You need momentum to get a sale over the line, and I think this is where the digital world plays into our hands, because you can keep things moving at a much faster pace with more touch points with the customer through chat, through video conferencing, through whichever medium you want to use, whichever platform is right. You can keep things going much quicker. You don't have to wait until diaries can coordinate and make a long journey to go and meet somebody in 3 weeks' time. It's like, I meet you today, right, let's have a follow-up tomorrow or the day after, and the momentum builds, the momentum keeps on going. You get further quicker, in my view. And this is where you use the virtual world to your advantage.
Right. I'm just going to pause there for a moment because I know Kevin has to leave us at 4 o'clock. So I'd just like to say thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us
You're
today,
welcome.
joining the panel, and for your thoughts today. I haven't mentioned this yet, but a recording of this session will be available after the event. So if those of you who want to go over anything that any of our panelists have said, you can have another look at the recording. But if you have to go, Kevin, thank you.
Unfortunately, I do, guys. Thank you for the thank you for the invitation. It's been fun to be part of. Thank you.
I can't see any more questions in the chat, but I have one. The questions that we sort of thought of beforehand as posing, but most have been answered. I've got a question around the generations that are coming through, and it was something that I think it was Kevin said. You know, the generations who are now able to use technology and WhatsApp messaging and so on. I'm thinking about some of the people that Mark mentioned, the Generation Z and the late millennials who are coming into the workplace and beginning to assume positions of some seniority. A lot of these people will have done a lot of their education remotely, so some of them will have done their A-levels and a large part of their university degree virtually. They may well have entered the workplace virtually. Tough though that was, onboarding was really difficult during lockdown. But through a tough schooling, they've developed more naturally and probably easier because they're younger, better skills at dealing with remote conversations and building relationships using technology. Do you think that that's going to have an impact on the sales world? Set aside everything else, but on the sales world, the type of person who's going to be coming into the selling environment, are they going to be at an advantage because of that experience? Anybody want to?
Personally, I don't think so.
Right. Okay.
So when I look at when I train new to salespeople, one of the key things I see is distraction. They've grown up in this world of technology, as we say. But when you sit down and watch telly, do you watch telly now, or do you go on your mobile phone as well? There's distractions all over the place. The new sellers who are coming up, they're all on these little messaging services. All these things keep popping up. There's a constant thing going on, whereas they're not concentrating 100% on the conversation. And this is one of the key things I see is it's not that they can deal with technology. We can all open a Zoom. We can all go into a room. It's not difficult technology. The difficulty is in the multitasking, the way people have been brought up now. As you say, we are not living in a simple society where people just concentrate on one thing. And I think that has a big effect on that age group coming up.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That landscape has changed. I mean, multitasking, we know from neuroscientists doesn't work. The brain can't cope with it. It's not capable of doing that and doing things effectively. They've taken some research where they've given people 3 tasks to do and say, multitask or do them sequentially. And the sequential route is more effective, more efficient, a better result out the other end. It's a myth that multitasking is good. Yeah, to be able to do that.
It's because the mind has one rule set. So only one thing gets into the mind. So if we're watching something, if we look at something else, it takes 0.02 seconds to wipe everything and concentrate on that. And it's that moment, and then we forget what we've just learned.
Yeah.
Or we're not concentrating on what the customer's saying because a little message has come up saying, John has just made a sale in our little inbox. I don't know if I can't remember what it is they use. But all these messages, all these signals, someone walking by them, they need to get into a place where they can concentrate 100% on what they're doing.
I think we're in danger here of getting ourselves into a bit of a biological neuroscience conversation here because and that's one that I'm going to really enjoy and really love because that's my background. But the brain can the brain can multitask in the sense that it can do lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of things at the same time because the brain is geared to keep us in survival mode and to keep us alive, and so therefore lungs inflate, heart beats, etc., etc., all at the same time. You used a very important word there, Chris, around the conscious brain and the conscious element of stuff. And Mark, you were talking about sequential things and stuff. In terms of emotional intelligence and being observant for cues and things, actually the brain can do that really, really well. It's more around concentrated things that the brain isn't as good at in terms of its conscious brain. And I think that if we go back to Bruce's question, when Bruce was saying, are they going to be more or better prepared for these kind of environments? Well, the reality is, as the brain, I don't mean evolves as in this long sort of 300 million year evolution process, but as they become more in tune with it, they will interact with it in a far different way than we are. So I completely agree with Chris, what Chris is saying. You literally, we can be sat in front of the TV and we can have our phone in our hand. That is the way we as adults are behaving now. We've adapted to that. The kids that have been brought up in that environment are doing things differently. The distraction is there, of course. The distraction will always be there. But actually, their focus of attention, like any single person's focus of attention, goes to where they're motivated to go to. And actually, the point there is their levels of motivation will be different to the levels of motivation that we had. And that's the key here. That's the key, understanding that motivational bias and then working towards that motivational bias. I think that is probably going to be the key to understanding and interacting with those youngsters as they come into the foreground.
Good. Thank you very much. Thanks. Interesting answers to that question. It's something that we talk about. A new generation coming through.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that we made a bit of a late start, and people may have other commitments to go to. I just think if we're really strict about this, whether we could go round the three of you and just see, on the basis of what we've heard this afternoon, if you've got any closing thoughts about this this topic of selling in the new environment. Mark, you started. I put you on the spot, because I expect you want to get to bed shortly, because it's probably
yeah, not far off.
And you've
yeah,
got some...
I think, you know, we to a large degree, to a hugely large degree, we have violently agreed. I think we're all on the same page in terms of how we see this issue. We've just got to get better and adapt to a new world, and the way that it's saying there are real benefits from, you know, this hybrid way of working, and it'll grow more and more virtual for sure, and we just need to get better at it. We really do, and there's a danger we're just using, you know, a lot of salespeople out there are using it as that excuse to say that's why I didn't win, and that's just not acceptable. It's poor sales skills, simple as that.
Okay. Chris, Batty, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. I think Janet's question was brilliant, and I love looking at the different ways in which we could answer that, because ultimately, you know, I don't think that virtual selling is anywhere near going to kill relationship-based selling. I think relationship-based selling is still one of the pillars, one of the scaffolds on which great sales is going to be made. And I think Mark was bang on in some of his comments earlier on, you know, and I echo it again. I think I used the phrase unchanging principles. The unchanging principles are there, and we do need to develop those. I think, Mark, your comment was something like, you know, even back sort of 20, 30 years ago, people still weren't asking questions. They still weren't listening. You know,
they weren't. No.
You know, those are still the relevant skills and the relevant behaviours that are going to maintain a good momentum through this phase of virtual selling. And guys, let's be honest, we don't know what's next. You know, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, the next thing will be here. And actually, I just think we're going to have to embrace that. I mean, when virtual reality really takes hold, and you're having a virtual reality presentation or some form of clever augmentation, you know, that will be the next thing. And all of a sudden, it won't be through the screen. It will be putting on goggles and all sorts of stuff. We just have to embrace it. We have to go with it. I think those are the key things, Bruce, and remember those unchanging principles.
Yeah, thanks. We're there with the virtual reality. I bought a kitchen last year through Wren, and when we finally finished the design, I put on the goggles, and because I hadn't quite recalibrated that I wasn't actually in the room, I fell over the coffee table because I started walking down the room. You have to stand still, Mr. Rowling, otherwise you'll do yourself some damage. Chris, finally, any closing thoughts?
Well, for me, I think we need to better understand the SDR and the AE's journey. We need to develop people better, from onboarding to everboarding. See, after onboarding, there comes a time when the SDR becomes static. They've learned the script. They've learned this. You know, they're comfortable in conversation. Then we need to be able to drive them, to be able to give them the advanced skills they need to ask the great questions. We need to be able to drive them to overachieve. Now, we need to prepare them for the AE role. And how do we drive the AE to overachieve? We need, as sales trainers, to really understand this process. What works at each section and how we're going to drive to overachieve. Now, we're looking here today at the virtual world. What does it take to succeed? Can we sit down and do actual, how many times do you see AEs going over a presentation from point one to the end of it with their manager? They're just let to get on with it. They're rarely taught how to do spice or how to get deep into these conversations. how to do, questioning funnels to bring the customer down to the value. All these things need to be set at the right time. I see onboarding where SDRs are taught differentiation. They don't even know how to present the script, let alone what the customers offer. So what we need to do is sit down, and it's almost like the FA did many years ago. They sat down and saw what the problems were in football. England didn't qualify for the World Cup. What were the problems? And then they looked, they did future basing. How are we going to get our best performers? And they went back and they said, for this, we need this, for that, we need that, for this, we need that. That's what we need to do. We need to dig deep into what we need at each stage. And that's virtual world is part of that. And we are in the virtual world. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, we're there already. Great, thank you. Thank all of you very much indeed. Especially to Mark for staying up into the middle of the night in front of his temple. We will record this. We have recorded this session, and we will send out a recording to everybody who signed up. If you've got any further comments or feedback for us, please let us have them. There will be further discussions in this series. We've pressed the pause button for a moment because we've had 3 already. The recording, as you can see on screen there, will be available on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to pick that up from the recording, and watch out for further discussions. We're going to be looking in the future at change, consulting in the change management arena, and organizational development. Dates will be announced via our usual LinkedIn channels. But that's it for today. So thank you very much. Thank you to our sponsors, LIFO. Mark can thank them in person over a glass of sake. And if you watch out, please join us again for please join us again for our next session. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us today, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.